Congratulations to all four teams who made it this far. In opening government, we have UI2. In UI1. In closing government, we have BINUS 2. And in closing opposition, we have Keio 1. My name is Mai. I'll be the chair for this finals. Paneling alongside with me to my right is Berhad. Behind me is Ron, Lucas, Fiha, Mabrur, and Saad. With a last minute change, excluded Alfred and Liza. Amrit will be the timekeeper. So with the motion of living people owing a moral obligation to valid standard of living for those in the future generation, I'd like to call upon the Prime Minister Jessica with the preferred pronoun she or they.
We're talking in a modern society to the context that we live in a world with humans and their greediness, individuality, and being very self-centric. We think this motion, we're very proud to post this. In the past until now, we have witnessed the progress of our world. But right now, at this very momentum, it already reached the stagnancy or even turning down to the bad of our world, right? So, our government is going to argue that we need to emphasize on the stronger nuance that we owe a moral obligation to the future generation. The opening government is this debate should be talking about value judgment debate in a world where we can evaluate our own action, whether or not we should prioritize our present action or our projection in the future generation to our kids and our grandkids, right? So what kinds of standard of living that we prefer? First, environmental standard, the quality of living on Earth that we're going to live until our future generation, right? But second of all, we're also going to talk about moral and humanity, that how we treat other humans, how we treat other creatures, and also how we treat, like, for example, lower society that is very in our status quo right now. So basically, in this speech, I'm going to bring about two things, right?
On what?
First, yes.
Standard of living, or will you make it different?
All our stance coming from opening government is we're going to stick with the equivalent standard of living that we currently have. For example, that if right now water for us to drink, then we also want to have this kind of resources, like natural resources, to be able to be enjoyed in the future generation, right? What we say is we do not want any degradation of standard of living. For example, the environmental standard, we do not want any more haze in the future generation, for example. So that's why we say that what we want is we are very okay if our world is going to be developed with technology and so on and so forth. But what we do not want is it's going to be degraded to what we have already have right now. Now, in this debate, I'm going to have 2 points. First, I'm going to say, why do we have responsibility? First, because it's reflective through tangible actions. But second of all, I'm going to talk how currently our situation is very concerning, and the degradation of our standard right now should be equipped with our strong ones in governments, right? Now, let's talk about why do we have more responsibility as humans, right? Now, moral responsibility comes when you're conscious and informed that your actions and behavior right now directly correlate with what happens next. For use of fossil fuels right now impacts directly to the sustainability of the food. Modern society right village because we think that they should be owed towards future generation because we get asymmetrical information on how we get information towards what happens if we use certain resources, right? For example, natural resources or whatsoever. We think with us being equipped with this kind of information, it's very crucial for us to feeling old for the future generation that we have certain privilege to begin with, and we should continue the legacy coming from the future generations, right? Now, we think it's very reflective and directly correlated with what happened in the future generations in our actions right now. Why is that so? Because, for example, if you're using your resources in the middle of scarcity, it creates a scarcity in the future generation, right? And the worst thing about that, first, because it's time sensitive, when we're talking about a momentum, it's temporary, and we need to manifest all the temporary thing about this proposal, or not about this issue in the long run. But second of all, it's very irreversible. When you already exhaust all the resources, it's going to be very irreversible in the sense that you will not be able to turn back the time, and you will not be able to undo what you have done with this kind of thing with your resources. No, Gaby. Now, in past precedents, we also already witnessed on how our ancestors already mitigating their greediness and mitigating the scarcity that's happening. That's why until now we are enjoying the legacy for our past precedents. That's why we say we have certain moral obligation to continuing the legacy, because what we do right now is going to be very reflective and directly contributing to what kind of living standard that the generation in the future is going to have, right? But before my second argument, yes, please.
Don't you think that acting on behalf of our own self-interest also allows us to think about the future investment of ourselves as the current society of humans?
Sometimes the self-interest is going to be backlashing with what future. Why is that so? Because currently we have been infiltrated with what of YOLO spirit. You only live once, therefore you don't need to think about what happens in the future, right? We also be infiltrated by the value that somehow your life only matters right now. You need to prioritize on your quality right now. Therefore, it's very okay to be greedy. It's very okay to be individualistic and impulsive just for the sake of your quality of living. Just justified, because in the past, your past ancestor has already sacrificed certain degree of their happiness for you to be living with a certain quality, right? So we think that your self-interest right now is going to be backlash in certain degree with what future generation is going to have. But going to my second argument, right? How we say that degradation of moral standard right now is already very concerning, and right now, this momentum is just nuance to have a moral obligation. Now, what happens in current modern society? First, we love consumerism. For example, like we emphasize on the spirit of individualism, like saying that you need to prioritize yourself before others, you need to preserve your own self-interest, and also about impulsivity in your life, and so on and so forth. Currently, what we say is that current momentum is very temporal. Like we need to maximize the momentum of increasing the awareness that you are owing certain degree of your future generation to the future generation. For example, that the usage of limited resources. What are the available resources? First, we have natural resources, right? But second, we also have financial resources. And third, we also have our political capital to spread the idea of we owe certain degree of responsibility to the future generation. Now, we really need to be conscious and aware that what we do right now already exhausts our limited resources. That's why when you have the sense of moral responsibility to the future generation, what you do is going to be very conscious and self-aware that what you do right now is going to be directly reflected and it degrades the moral standards of the future generation. Within degradation of moral standards is already concerning and very proud.
I thank the Prime Minister for his speech. I'd like to invite Leader of Opposition, Rebuttal, preferred pronoun,
Members of the House, opening opposition feels the need to first clarify what does it mean by moral obligation, right? This debate should not be a debate whether or not conserving resources is good or not, because that will be an unfair burden coming from opening opposition. How should the debate be? Debate should be when we should prioritize current generation and future generation. Who should we choose in return, given the fact that we currently live in a society where problems still exist anyway, and one must be favored before the other? That's number one. Number two, what do we mean? The world that is portrayed by opening government should be a world where most likely then pressured to overly reduce the spending of things under the pretext that these resources might be necessary for future generation, right? So this debate should be whether or not that kind of mindset is necessary or not in our current society. And in that regards, I'm going to bring three things in today's debate. Number one, we would argue that this is an unjust imposition of burden. Number two, we argue that moral obligation is harmful towards the survivability of present generation, and number three, obligation is harmful towards the construction of happiness for current generation and for future generations. Before that, rebuttals towards the case coming from that side of the house that is not intertwined in my argument. They argue that currently present generation has no interest in preserving all of these resources because they have an asymmetry of information. Number one, we need to understand that the asymmetry of information to a certain extent has existed in society because we continuously try to learn about how much our resources are left. But all of those things comes not because of the moral obligation imposed towards future generation, but it's because we have an interest as a present generation, because we as a generation wants to make sure that our life is as meaningful as possible and the quality of our life is as good as possible. So it's still possible without the existence of such moral obligation imposed in our society, ladies and gentlemen. But when you have that interest, most likely you will have the interest to improve, for example, things that could benefit the resources, our resource planning, for example. Because of the interest of present generation to use it as a part of claiming intellectual property rights, for example, ladies and gentlemen. And it's only then can these people understand the input of developing such technology that can be used in the future. Because without it, when we have that moral obligation, most of our technologies would not be able to be claimed for intellectual property right under the pretext of we have to give it to the future generation. And without it, most people right now will not have the interest to do so because the interest because the harm of, for example, or the risk of investing on such technology will not have accrued anyway, ladies and gentlemen. And in comparison, if you live in the world where proposition wants you to live in, most probably they will think that as long as they can fulfill the moral obligation of, for example, reducing usage or reducing spending, then that would most probably be enough because they've already done their obligation as society, ladies and gentlemen, and that will not have create development like what they want like they envision in opening government, ladies and gentlemen. So directly proceed to my argument. Number one, we think that this is an unjust imposition of burden. But before I continue, closing.
Yes, within it, insofar as technology does not intersect with what the future generation's interest is, we're fine with that. If these kind of technology actually harms the future generation, how are you going to justify that?
Our problem is that most technologies are developed for the interest of that particular individual as of now, because they can claim profit out of it. But when you're not allowed to do so under the pretext of more future generation, most of these people will not want to take that risk and develop such technology that could preserve resources. So let's talk about unjust imposition of burden. Ladies and gentlemen, humans in general are unable to change the circumstance to which they are born into, right? You cannot choose whether or not you're born poor, you're born rich, or in what country you're born in. Therefore, humans must be allowed as much freedom as possible in life. Even if we are unlimited by norms and law, we are only limited as far as we choose to subscribe into that community. That's why we allow freedom of movement, because people must be able to choose who they want to be responsible to and what they want to be responsible of. Ladies and gentlemen, the problem is that future generation should not be that kind of limit, because number one, you can never rationalize what will happen in the future. So you cannot know whether you want to subscribe and you want to be responsible of such community or not. That is way different if you want to subscribe to the current generation, where you can perceive it with your five senses and then rationalize whether or not you want to be responsible for that community or not. Ladies and gentlemen, the act of moral obligation is unjust, because that means that regardless of where you're born into, you're suddenly becoming responsible of someone you don't even know of, and you can never know of, ladies and gentlemen. That is an unjust imposition of burden. But why is it harmful to survivability? Because we must understand that the problem that the current generation face right now is more likely more harmful, intangible, and more tangible compared to the problem that future generation might face. For example, if currently we are forced to raise standards of, for example, minimum wage, or for example, if we are forced to, for example, increase the extraction of oil because a lot of people cannot access all of those oil, we think that there's a more direct problem that we need to solve now before we can able to solve problems in the future. For example, if you're not allowed to, for example, open up forests to build up residences because of past future generation, most likely you will not be able to create sustainable living residence for people in the current generation, ladies and gentlemen, because the people in current generation cannot make as much technology as people in the future current generation, and as a result, most probably people in the future generation would not be able to live in a meaningful way because they're born into a condition that past generation or current generation are being doomed upon because of this policy. So this is why sometimes that problem we need to prioritize which one is more direct, and in that regards, current generation should come first. But lastly, moral obligation is harmful towards construction of happiness, ladies and gentlemen. Happiness is constructed when you're able to get what you want when you need it, be it goods or services. But when you do this, most likely your efforts to achieve goods and resources will always be limited by society, because you can never argue whether the future generation would want the same resources as you or not. But more importantly, it's also harmful towards future generation, because what you must understand is that resource will deplete nonetheless. So the future generation will be brought into worse condition, where the resources are already even worse, and the future generation will also be subject to the same moral obligation that opening government to you to be imposed on. And as a result, these people will not be able to achieve that much happiness as well. We think it is better on our side of the house when people are free to do so. We're free to pursue happiness, but at the same time have the utmost interest to maximize all of happiness until for times to come. And as a result, it will be much better for them to develop technologies that can preserve resources, because they even understand that it's a benefit for them in as a current generation to preserve all the resources and preserve all the goods and services. We're never been proud to oppose.
Leader of Opposition for his speech. Now it's your right, Deputy Prime Minister Andre, who identifies as he or they.
We don't think that the opponent opposition understand the nuance that we are, as opponent government, try to set up this debate. Because if we think that if the linearity of what happened in the past, that we are still going in terms of progressiveness that we are going to achieve now, there is nothing, there's no problems. However, for example, a new values, a progression of values, and the overbooming of such values actually hampers us, that we are currently trending towards the downfall of our society. The values, for example, like consumerism, the value of individualism, as opposed to what happened in the past of collective behavior, the past of collective responsibility. This is the thing that is now diminished, right, Madam Speaker? We think as a local government, we have set a moral standard of what we as a society should be, that we should be as considerate and as collective as possible, rather than going with their side of focusing on personal happy going to harm people in the future, right? Now, I'm going to talk about one extension. I'm going to talk to you deeper about why this phenomenon actually appears, and why now currently people have a stronger moral standard to begin with. Right? However, let's first deal with the case of opening opposition technology, because this is the most interesting, right? Because we are not going to oppose, for example, like the existence of green technologies, right? For those who are for the sake of the future, because the fact that we are creating green technology, it shows that even some people actually still cares about the future. However, what we don't like is, for example, the existence of technology that actually only benefits you and only benefits your own current system, current existing condition. For example, like when you are creating technologies that can only be fueled, for example, that For example, technologies like VW that actually harms, that actually trying to cover up your mistakes and do harms, right? This is the examples of how technology can actually lead you to make bad decisions for humanity, right? It means that you, as an individual, uses technology in order to cover up your mistakes and also only for your personal benefits. This is the form of technology that we don't support, right? Because we also support technology for their mistakes. However, the existence of technology, for example, you're also talking about the existence of now people do have immense power, for example, for the future. For example, like what happens in a lot of dystopian movies, right? There are actually some technologies that we currently do not that we currently think that it's important. However, it's actually damaging to the future. Look at how damaging actually is, for example, like social media. Even though with those overwhelming benefits, but it also comes with the whole different costs, right? It also, not only in terms of technology, also how people live, but it also comes in excess of the, for example, the existing moral value, like religions, like also collective benefit. For example, how nowadays people also don't care that they have children or not. It shows that how people actually don't care about the future. They are also only cares, and the existence of technology only serves to such use, right? Therefore, we don't think that it happens. Yes, before that.
Why must suddenly be generation that we know nothing about and we cannot possibly comprehend compared to the current generation, where we can comprehend whether or not the values are similar, and whether or not we want to contribute to that community?
I'm going to talk about that. Why we have to care about the future generation, right? Because we have to understand that this world, the existing world, is not simply ourselves. This world existed since like million years ago, and we think that people in the past do have such responsibility. They actually socialize their children to behave in such way that they're being, for example, financial conservative. That they have to care about the existence of their children in the future. They even socialize themselves to care about another person, as opposed to what happens now when you are socialized to only care about your own safety and your own benefits. This is simply bad. Because why? Because the existence of yourselves also contingent to the moral responsibility that is given from your past presidents, right? It means that the past generations actually do care about you, even though they do not understand that there is a personal benefit in and on themselves, right? However, the existence of, for example, individualism, especially nowadays, makes people start to question, why should I care about future generations? This is simply bad in and on themselves, because this is the value that actually going to direct us to the systems of humanity, right? Another rebuttals for their ideas, right? Because now we have to compare values, because we bring the idea of continuity versus their idea of personal happiness, right? Because we think that this is the very value that we are going to debate in this motion, right? Because we do care about future happiness of another person. This also means that you're not only focusing on your personal happiness, but also the collective happiness of the society, right? Because it's simply unfair if they think that your own happiness does not come in expense of other person. For example, we're talking about how you're happy. For example, the advancement of right actually hampers your rights in the first place, right? For example, for those privileged community. It means cares about your own happiness. It means that the future, you are going to set the bad moral standard for the people in the future. That's why we think that it is much better if you care about the community happiness, right? The happiness that you're going to have in the future. That it means two things, right? Because one, it means that you also care about what happens in the future. However, second thing, it also says to people that you also have to care, that they also have to care about you. It means that it creates a sense of belonging of these people, right? Which doesn't happen if you only simply care about your personal happiness. That's why we think that this is a bad. This is a bad moral standard that the opening oppositions want to impose on. However, now let's talk about the addition of context. Why this phenomenon actually occurs, right? Because look, Mr. Speaker, in the past we have progressed a lot, right? However, the existence of, for example, like technology, the existence of how we codify our moral standard changes our views. It means that we are now the current changing of our moral standard. We are especially the existence of technologies. It booms everything. For example, the resources that we have used. For example, in 1950 to 1960, for example, we only used like 1% of resources. However, the thing is, when we are talking about, for example, in 2010 to 2015, the more resources, like we are using it 10-fold or 100-fold, right? It means there is a huge difference between what happened in the past and what happens now. And you have to understand that the existence of such changing moral values do directly harms our world. It means that you're much more individualistic and you're much more likely to spend resources on behalf of yourselves. When we don't understand what is so bad, we're thinking about the future, and we think in terms of individualism, we think collective happiness should flourish.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his speech. And I'd like to invite Deputy Leader of Opposition, Gabriel. Madam Chair, my side of the House takes this debate if we have proven to you extensively that our acting on self-interest will also provide benefit for the future generation. And in addition to that, we believe that we're the only side of the House who has proven to you why providing this moral obligation towards the current society is actually going to harm the current society in itself as well as the future generation. And under the same breath, we also believe that morally obliging people is only going to harm humanity as a whole. Therefore, there are several questions I've identified in today's debate. Let's just go directly to them. Let's just assume the best case of opening government, right? When they talk about how it's for the best interest in which they believe the society right now cannot is overclouded with the idea that we need to be greedy and the perspective of you only live once. We don't necessarily think, ladies and gentlemen, that they've proven to you why this very perspective is bad. They have not proven to you why consumerism and wanting to establish happiness is necessarily bad. Because then as human beings, we believe that that's what we live for in this world, ladies and gentlemen. We gain any form of benefit, any form of pleasure, and we don't necessarily think that is a bad thing to be done, ladies and gentlemen. In addition to that, even if we do to a certain extent harm other people, then we're bounded by law anyway. But what matters is the fact that we always have the right to maximize our happiness in the world, ladies and gentlemen, because that's what humanity has been all about. Because then you don't know what else to do in this world if you don't have happiness, right? But exactly because you only live once, ladies and gentlemen, you have the interest to enhance your happiness as long as possible. Because you don't know when you're going to die, therefore you do have that certain interest to also provide as long as possible scenario in which you're going to live in that good condition, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, in the micro level, we believe that we've provided you a defense in regards to why we believe that individual happiness should be catered to. But on the macro level, right, let's characterize what humanity is about. We believe that humanity is all about wanting to improve the livelihood of the current generation. And we believe that to a certain extent, when you're dealing with technology, you're dealing with extraction and so on and so forth, it does include the process of trial and error, Mr. Madam Chair. Therefore, we believe that the current context in which we see medical trials of protecting lives, extraction of oils have undergone, numerous environmental disasters. We believe that all of those are essentially necessary in order for us to advance our cause of such development, ladies and gentlemen. Because without all of these faults, you will not know in which you can improve a certain technology, for example. And we believe that to a certain extent, those harms are necessary to be undertaken in order for us to achieve better technology for our current generation, in which we are more morally obliged to, ladies and gentlemen. In their side of the house, what's going to happen is a certain sense of complacency, ladies and gentlemen, because now they fear that if you do certain risky things in terms of investing in technology, for example, if you extract oil too much and there's a possibility of it harming or spoiling the waters, ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to take that risk, in which we believe that those risks are worthy to be taken anyway. And if there are glitches, as what's happening in the haze right now, we see that the current generation is trying to fix it, ladies and gentlemen. There will always be interest to want to contain all of these glitches that has happened. And therefore, we don't necessarily think that the process of trial and error is something that we, as opening opposition, would like to compromise by living under the scenario of universe coming from government side of the house, ladies and gentlemen. Therefore, we think that our longevity is also something that we always consider and is always based on self-interest, right? That's why, for example, parents will always want what's best for their children, because to a certain extent, It's a legacy of theirs as parents, ladies and gentlemen. They want to continue themselves. They want to continue their lives. They want their identity to continue to exist in the world in the form of their children. But what you need to understand is that it's not based on moral obligation towards necessarily the children or the future. They're acting based on self-interest, in which therefore we believe that the preservation of right of the future generation is already there to begin with. We believe that the idea of interest, ladies and gentlemen, protects ourselves and our future generation is also going to have an implicit benefit out of it. Therefore, what have I proven to you? The thing that I've proven to you is that we, by focusing more on the current generation, by putting more on the priority, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to ensure that our second priority is also going to be preserved. It's better preserved under our scenario of putting ourselves over the future generation, in which is still intangible and still too future oriented. We can't see that. Yeah.
Okay, so you want happiness, right? But the problem with happiness, it's very personalized and it's very subjective. Why? In your side, individual happiness is going to be better in comparison to the collective benefit.
First of all, you need to argue first why having individual happiness is not okay to begin with. Second of all, we have proven to you how individual happiness extends to as long a time as possible. Therefore, the future generation will always have that benefit as well, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, let's just go to the reason why then we should not go to the extent of moral obligation. But before that, one last thing. We think that the future generation will also be able to overcome the challenges that they're going to face in the future, Mr. Madam Chair. They are going to be adaptable as how we are as humans in the current context is adaptable. And we believe that one of the stepping stones to it is by having as much development from the past and learning as much mistakes in the past in order for us to build from all of that. And therefore, we believe that the challenges can actually be faced by the future generation. Before proceeding to my second issue, is there any PR conclusion? All right. Why then we believe that we should not go to the extent of morally obliging these people? As Aldi has told you, right? The current society that you're born in is also someone you need to take into account, ladies and gentlemen, because they're also going to be born in a condition of information asymmetry. They cannot decide where they want to be born in, and why then, to a certain extent, they need to be obliged to be accountable in which we believe, as what I've told you, that the basic interest of human which needs to be catered to is themselves, because then the only chance, the only vessel in which they can be happy is not by other people, but as yourself, as human being. You define your own happiness. You make your way to achieve that happiness on your own, ladies and gentlemen, because you cannot make an agency towards another person to achieve it for you. Therefore, you need to make sure that the maximization of happiness does come in the fairest form for the people living in the current society. But why then we need to make sure that the current society is well better off, right? Because we believe that the tangible harm and the tangible benefit is more to ourselves in the current context, ladies and gentlemen, and we believe that that is what's best for ourselves. We think that in the future, right, as what I've told you, the people in the future will always have their capacity and in itself to be able to handle all of these problems anyway, right? For example, in the past, the feminist movement are also well, in terms of fighting for female rights movement, ladies and gentlemen, but that's their own fight. In the current society, at least now, we are more able to adapt towards those changes. We're more able to break through that glass ceiling, and therefore we believe that the fight is exclusive onto their own, and we believe that we have our own way to adapt to it. For all those reasons, ladies and gentlemen, we should allow people to enjoy their lives. YOLO. I thank Deputy Leader of Opposition to begin the closing half. I call upon the Member of Government, Stella, to turn on his sheet and
We will have no problem with people who already have incentives to save the environment. The question then will be, on whether or not we can impose that to everyone else in the current world to start with. I'm going to answer to you the most important question in this debate. Firstly, before that, like this cycle is all about happiness and YOLO thing that Gaby wants to have in this debate, right? Happiness. Firstly, we think that happiness, even in the status quo of their side, can also be achieved. Taking the examples of living residences, for example, or like what Ali wants, we think like what kind of living residences that they want. Understanding the trend that we have right now is high-rise apartment, for example, then you go to New York for that. If you want villa, you go to Indonesia, Mr. Speaker, which already exists in the status quo where you can just live in there. We do not think there is any certainty of you needing to open up a new land to start with, Mr. Speaker. We don't think that the happiness that they're talking about is real to start with. If you have problem with that, however, then you renovate them, Mr. Speaker. We don't think that we have problem with that. Secondly, even if that there is some happiness that you can obtain, we think it is okay for you to impose the burden to you. It's also going to also answer the unjust imposition that they want to have. Firstly, we think that we do not burden the society to better the environment, Mr. Speaker, as to say that we are not going to ask you to clean the air so that we can go into 20 or 30 years where the air is so clean, but we're only asking you to be reasonable in using your vehicle, for example, reasonable in using your motorcycles and things like that. We do not think it is that much of burden for the society, understanding that they can also have the capability to do so. But second response, we think it is also a fair situation because everybody is precisely put into the same moral obligation. Compared to them, when for example there are people who are already incentivized to do better to the environment, then no one will change at the end of the day because everybody else is still polluting the air. Meaning that you also put unfair burden towards these kind of people because these kind of people cannot have the fruit of their hard work of preserving the environment. We think that on their side you're burdening these people at the end of the day, right? It is much more fair in us because everybody is put on the same moral obligation to preserve the environment. So we think if you want fairness, you go to our case. But even if, right, to respond, there is a burden in their case, it is justified to be imposed. This is also will be answering why we can be responsible to future generation. Because the problem with this future generation who is not born yet is that these poor young heart, Mr. Speaker, cannot have and cannot defend themselves. These people are still babies that cannot defend or have any capacity to actually better their case. They're not even asked to be lived in this world, Mr. Speaker. The least that we can do as this generation is to at least provide the same living, sustainable environment for them to live at the end of the day because they cannot have the capability to do so. If in the future they have capability, that's good. But the question is whether or not when they're not even born yet, when they do not even have the capability, then you should or not help them at the end. We think that's the very least that you can do, right? Okay, that's gone on our first issue about how it is unfair for you to impose the burden towards this young generation. Then, okay, you've heard that.
Okay, resource will depend anyway. The way to solve it is sometimes risky. A risk people would not normally want to take if they're bound by duty to preserve it to future generations and they're afraid of taking those risks.
We think that people will still, okay, firstly, if it is really that risky, we're fine, you shouldn't take that option. Either you can do other options that are not as risky. For example, wind energy, solar energy, things that are not as dangerous as the what have to look like, right? We do not have problem with that. Second issue that I'm going to talk to you about is that why current generation is justified to be defined the morality to create the trend of progress all across the society. The problem is, Mr. Speaker, the problem right now, the people that they are wanting to defend are the people who are already aware of these environmental damage. These people are scientists, top governmental position, or the higher side of the society. Most time than not, they're educated and they have lots of money to start with. They're living in a comfortable life. Meaning that even in their case, the Maslow hierarchy, they are already moved on from the basic needs because they are already rich to start with. The problem, we're okay with this kind of progress, right? But we think that in order for you to make a real change to the environmental damage that we're facing right now, you need to work alongside the middle class society. The problem with middle class society right now is that these people do have the money to actually have more capability, but the problem is they do not opt in to a greener lifestyle. And in an aggregate number, Mr. Speaker, this middle class society contribute lots to the environmental damage that happens in the status quo. The problem is they opt in to use the chemical products that are lots cheaper, but it's less greener than other products. They choose to opt into these kind of products. We think you need to impose them also the moral obligation so you can have a trend that is same across the society. The society that they want, which are already aware, but also the people that are also the middle class. We think the gravity will be much more different if you impose children to this middle class. The comparative is, if you go to Aldi's case, then you will only talk about data, how much resource that we have. But in our case, we put them that you are obliged to your children, Mr. Speaker. Precisely, this put a very big gravity towards the middle class society that you also need to save the environment. At the very least, what we ask from these people is to at least not opt into plastic bags, to at least use paper bags, Mr. Speaker. That's the least you can do, which in aggregate number is so much significant, Mr. Speaker. We think that's the least you can do to create a trend all across the society. Second issue I'm going to talk to you about is how moral obligation is important to create the wake-up call to future research like what OO wants. The problem is this, Mr. Speaker. In the status quo, our focus is to only what here and what now. Not only that, you also work in a market and in the demand of supply and in the demand and supply mechanism in society. In the status quo right now, people are so entrenched and so loving the nuclear energy. The problem is you only actually goes into the nuclear energy without necessarily thinking about other ways that is possible, such as wind energy, which is so much too difficult and so hard to defend and to develop right now, but you do not opt into that. The problem is, Mr. Speaker, in order for the future generation to be able to actually act up and to actually be better in this, you need to set the milestones right now. At the very least, you need to also develop the wind energy. You need to develop also the solar energy. Although that we understand that it is hard, we think when you impose the moral obligation to everyone, then you also create the demand from the society to also push for the company to ensure that you also make a better wind energy and solar energy that in the status quo you do not defend, Mr. Speaker. At the very least, you're going to set the stepping stone for these people at the end to develop it for their future generation, Mr. Speaker. We think that is much more important. At the very least, Mr. Speaker, what is comparable is that in their case, the society will only live YOLO without necessarily thinking about their future generation, but at least in our case, you set the future call research. At the very least, you ensure that you set the milestones for this young generation we back to propose.
Guys, there is a patch tool over there, so we can use that as well.
Thank you, member of government. Now I'd like to invite member of opposition, Tom, who identifies as he or they.
Can you hear me? Okay.
No worries, sorry. There's nothing wrong, you can go on.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Speaker, we do not think this debate is about whether we should fulfill, the current generation should fulfill a moral obligation for the future generations or not. We believe this debate is more rather about whether preserving of the present current standard of living is a good way to fulfill a moral obligation or not. Even if we consider the stance of the government that we have a moral obligation to care or save future generations, we believe preserving present standard of living is a wrong way and within to fulfill our obligation. We believe creating new or better standard of living is a better way to fulfill our generation, and this is our extension. And we will, in order to fulfill that things, we will consumption of current or present standard of living is necessary for that.
And we think this extension is a tie-break in comparison about the issue of moral obligation for future. And actually, government side did not fulfill the burden, while preserving is the best way or better way to fulfill that obligation. We really opening opposition, try to escape from burden about future generation of prioritization, but we won't take that burden and prove to you, and now it's in our side. That is the extension from the closing opposition. So what we wanted to talk to you as a member of opposition, first we talked to you about why preserving of the current standard of living, it cannot fulfill the responsibility or demand of the future generations. And second, I'll explain to you why we cannot create a new things, new better technology, or create new standard of living if we preserve this. Thirdly, I want to explain why this way of moral fulfilling the moral obligation is a better way, and why our scenario is better thing. All rebuttals are integrated in my point. So first point, why preserving the government way cannot actually fulfill responsibility and demand of the future generations. Two analysis here. Firstly, we have to recognize the resource will run out anyway. We think even preserve oils, coils, or natural resources, we think it's actually limited on the earth. Therefore, even if we preserve, what they can do is just postponing the day or time of running out. We think anyway, it can run out. Therefore, within certain generation and the more next future cannot access to that oil or unlimited resources anyway. Therefore, we think we have to find another way. Secondly, we think the standard of living is changeable in the first place. I directly clashes with the concept of both government side. For taking an example, the presidents, for example, the past or old generation used whale oil, for example, 100 years, but actually new technology advanced. Now we use oil, solar panels, wind powers, or hydrogen for using the more machines, for example. We think we do not need the old way of our old style of energy. Or like the past age used horse or cow for moving or transportation or agriculture uses, but we do not use it now. Or other concept, we think that living standard may be extended to the other social concept like family, for example, integrated family. But actually, even if we keep the integrated family in the conservative idea, we actually now change, and individualism actually now more focused, and people not more access to it more. We think the concept of living standard can actually change. Now, current generation wants access to a different type of living standard now. Therefore, preserving actually useless in the current status. We do not no longer need horse, cow, whale oil, or integrated families now. So in that case, we think that preserving is not a way. No, thank you. So how we believe that actually we believe that creation of a new style way, new technology is actually necessary, but how it can be deterred by preserving that thing. Four analysis here. Firstly, actually sacrificing our economy very much. Economy cannot actually development are fully deterred. How? Even for example, fossil fuels is very necessary requirement for cars, trains, transportation, importing food from foreign countries or global business and so on. Also, limited natural resources, for example, is very crucial for smartphones, computers, medicine that consume natural species, for example. If we do not use those things, we will money trade on globally can be limited. Combination of ideas is limited. Human lifestyle can also be limited by a lack of medicine or foods that can be created by consuming of those natural resources. We believe it's so crucially damaging on the economy and on the development. So in that case, and secondly, we think that incentive to create new things are also deterred by preserving, because we believe that the natural resources do not run out, expected to run out in 400 years, in next 400 years, for example. In that case, there is no demand for the new technology now or in lifetime for researchers. Therefore, investments cannot be for this new technology will be less, because investments is already risky. So there is no, if there is no urgent demand, there is no significant return of benefit by the technology. Therefore, there is less investment. We do not we think there is few new technology to change the living standard in the cases. Thirdly, we will take in technological advance is significantly high with the economical development. We will, if the economy develops, we have more investment, more money, and more effort to make new things, to invest on a research institute, for example. In that case, we can have better technology by the, yes.
same standard of environment doesn't mean oil, doesn't mean coal. That means if in right now we can have cars with oil, then in the future we can have cars with electric cars. Why is it so harmful with you?
What we are talking is that creating solar energy or wind energy technology requires the consumption of unlimited resources in the first place. How it's possible if we do not have global communication business, for example, that also consumes that limited resources? They have to explain that. And also consumerism violates that what opening comment pointed out. But we believe that actually if there was no demand by consumption, there was less demand for new technology. We think by economical development, we can have better technology that changes our lifestyle. So why this way of fulfilling obligation is actually better? Two analyses here. Firstly, we think the future generation can access the better living standard. By having new technology, they have more options, better technology that enables better living standard. Our current generation of living standard is better than past generation, we can say. Secondly, we think it's a more sustainable way because before running out, we have to find another way, alternative way to keep our life. But if there was little economic capacity to do so, we cannot actually find. It's hard to find. Therefore, in our side, by having a new alternative technology, we can sustainably live and find and survive more future and human can work. What we want to talk to you from the closing opposition, we directly crisis the stance of the government side and consider the idea and we our way to create new technology is a better way to food, and preserving cannot actually have nothing to do and not meaningless to our future generation. By this, our extension is better. Thank you.
Next member of opposition, and I'd like to invite Government Whip Willem to identify his key areas.
Firstly, we don't think that the extension coming from closing opposition is actually relevant, right? Because we from closing government think that it's okay if you have ambition, but not all people in the status quo have that ambition already. So what we are suggesting from closing government is that we're going to impose a blanket moral obligation at the very least to all people to preserve the current standard of living standard, right? Which we think will be better as well insofar as the concern about future generation is going to be catered, right? But this is also inconsistent with what OOS already want to defend, right? Because this means you're going to impose more burden to these individuals and they have to justify why that's good, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk to you about two things in my speech. First of all, why do we need to impose a moral obligation? But second of all, why is it going to be better for living standards? So going to the first place. So basically, opposition idea is that we know nothing about future generation, right? That's why we don't have any obligation towards them. First of all, false. We at the very least know that at least there will be a continuation of the human species at the very least, because human has the basic instinct of basic survivability and collective survivability and also sustainability of our own species and the longevity and things like that. And people have always aspired to continue their own bloodline. So at the very least, we know that we're going to have children anyway. But it's also better because right now, at the current status quo, future generation is a pseudo-abstract community that you belong to collectively, ladies and gentlemen. In the status quo, individuality hampers you from taking that moral obligation because you see you as an individual who needs to gain as much benefits as possible, ladies and gentlemen. This hampers you from having any self-interest or having any moral obligation to cater to that interest, to cater to your basic, to your sustainability of human lives, ladies and gentlemen. So we believe that because of the fact that humans have this basic need to preserve the human race, it is very much important for us to have this moral obligation, right? But
lastly, even if you don't, we say that you're complicit to the direct harms in the future, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why you like criminalize people is because you impose a direct harm to them. Where in this case, you can already project the direct harms existed. You have already can have the calculus, because if you have this too much AC, for example, you can blow a hole in the ozone layer, and that can harm so many people in the future generation. Once you can project that direct harm, we say that it's okay for you to impose that kind of moral obligation, because in the status quo right now, you have no interest. It is okay for them. It is okay for us to say that they will think it is enough, because those actors are the kind of actors that in the status quo have no interest already in preserving the environment or preserving the living standard. So at the very least, we cater to those people, and we say that they now have a moral obligation. Second thing that they say is on how conflicts are happening right now. What we have already been suggesting from my POI is that it's fine for you to resolve conflicts as long as it doesn't clash with the future generation, with the interest of the future generation. And we think that most of the conflict resolution does not clashes with those interests either, right? Because conflict resolution means happy things for everyone. But second of all, we think that it's going to be better if you have this moral obligation. Why? Because only then, under government side, then you can step back and recalculate what kind of future perception that you want. What do you want your future generation to perceive of you, ladies and gentlemen? This can only happen once you impose it to everyone, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that it's going to be good, because what you need to understand is that preservation of living standard is a collective effort, not just an individual effort, ladies and gentlemen. But what's worse, under their side, right? Because once there are some people who have already have this natural interest to have that right, but if they see that not all people do that, they will lose their interest, because they think that what they're doing does not benefit the environment and does not benefit the current living standard anyway. We think that is precisely that, right? But lastly, they say self-interest is enough. First of all, this is a very characterization based, right? Because not all people have children to begin with. Not all people know the future generation to begin with, right? And this is very harmful, right? Because this good self-interest is only contingent to this specific individual thing that you will or will not probably get at the end of the day. We think the foreign closing government, it is urgent to impose an obligation, considering the amount of damage that has exponentially rise within these recent years, with the amount of industrialization and things like that. We think it is very much important for us to impose this burden right now. But lastly, right, why do we have to preserve this present standard of living, right? This is the question from closing opposition, because we think that is the very least that we can do to our future generation, ladies and gentlemen. And that is when you can also recalculate. If you want to have a better standard of living, that is when you can recalculate. Once you have this moral obligation for this future generation, once you have this future calculus, without this future calculus exist, what you're going to calculate is your own personal benefit, and we think that is precisely bad. Before that, yes,
humans should be free to choose the community to which you want to contribute. Understanding they would want to mitigate harm for themselves, why should they suddenly be responsible to another community in the future just because we know that they will exist in the future?
Well, what we're suggesting is that if you're mitigating harm for yourself, probably you're also mitigating harm for your other community and for your future generation as well. And we don't think how this is going to be bad, right? Because this is precisely where we want to draw that your self-interest should be put first, because at the very least because this is what Stella has already said, by the way. Because we think that those future generation does not have to be born anyway. They also have this birth lottery anyway. They don't have to be born in this earth anyway. So finally, we think that you will at least have the burden to have this basic, but I think it's going to be better for our living standard. And this is also what opposition side has already been complaining, right? Because resources will be depleted anyway. First of all, that is why you need a moral obligation to begin with, to shift the calculus of wanting to gain as much profit as possible from those resources, to slowing down a bit and saving some for your future generation. But moreover, if these resources exist, we think that the natural incentive to prolong resources, to have researchers in other sustainable energies can only exist if you have this moral obligation, if you have a sense of collective belongingness to that future generation, right? Because under their side, there will be no interest, because by the time you die, the resources will also, by the time the resources die, you will also die as well. We don't think that it is a sustainable incentive to begin with. But second, they say you cannot create a sustainable living residence. I'm sorry, Aldi, but you need trees. But second of all, we think that this doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Because states has already created a plan to ensure that sustainability exists even if forests exist. That's why we believe that middle class people, for example, have already have like high-rise apartment and things like that, which currently exist in the status quo because government can provide these basic needs for all of them. But lastly, we say insofar as technology and new technologies is concerned, we think it's going to be better under our side because only when you have this moral obligation, you can force all people to think back and say that this solar energy is needed, that this clean energy is needed, which otherwise would not happen because they still cooked up on oil is needed, cooked up on the idea as that this petrol is needed. Ladies and gentlemen. So because of the of human obligation.
I think that would whip through speech and to end this debate, I'd like to invite opposition whip Kasumi, who identifies as she right here.
Oh yeah? You sure it's fine?
Ladies and gentlemen, so what the closing opposition side has done in this debate is very simple. We prove, even if we concede the best case scenario of the entire government side, even if we concede that current generation are responsible for the future generation, the way of fulfilling the responsibility is not to preserve the best on the present standard of living, and the best way to the best way to fulfill the responsibility for the future generation is to create the new living standard and the new method, right? Because living standard is changeable from the generation to generation, and because everything has limitation, and also because creating the new living standard doesn't need the sacrifice the new generation. And also we are consistent to the opening opposition side because we support those technological development, and because the opening opposition also oppose the preserving because it sacrificed the current generation. So I will answer only one question. Even if those current generation are responsible for the future generation, which way is better for fulfilling the responsibility for the future generation? So, and all my rebuttals I take in my case. So, firstly, the opening opposition side, opening government told you that those living people should preserve the resources, such as national resources, for example, because if we run out those resources, it's irreversible. But firstly, okay, we concede those natural resources
is irreversible. But that's why we say we should create the new resource, not on the current natural resource, not try to preserve the current resource, because we told you that those running out of the resource rather incentivize the people and rather incentivize the companies to develop and create the new technology or new natural resources. I will give you example. Oil, for example, oil will be run out within 40 years. But because those oil will be run out, and because we know that oil will be run out, new alternative resource is created now. For example, recently those artificial oil is being studied, and artificial oil will be achieved within a few years, right? So because those companies know that oil will be limited, so company has the incentive to create the new alternative oil because it is big business chance, right? So and moreover, we say those, for example, in the logic, those oil is also the present living standard, right? Those living people blanketly believe that oil is necessary and fundamental to everyone, but we think those living standard will be changeable for the future generation. Oil is not the living standard, and oil is not necessary for their basic. And because artificial oil or new alternative resource can replace the oil, right? So no. And secondly, the closing government side told you that preserving doesn't mean sacrificing the current generation to responses here. Firstly, we think that preserving some resources, meaning that sacrificing the current generation, as we said. For example, the closing government side considered those middle class people buy the cheaper chemical products, right? So they said that we should preserve, right? They should preserve those for environment. Well, we said those if middle class people have to buy the more expensive products, which means that they sacrifice themselves, right? Because those middle class people cannot afford to buy expensive commodity because they are not rich. They do not have the financial capacity to buy the new thing. They only have the capacity to buy the daily products, right? So no. And also, we say that even if those preserving does not mean sacrifice the current generation itself, we think still preserving are sacrificing the future development. We told you, right? So we think it is mutually exclusive, preserving or creating the new technology or a new living standard as a preview or is offering.
Okay. So creation of other technology is contingent to current society feel the present benefit of it, which we say as opening government, it hinders the progress of other technology because sometimes it does not create benefit of it.
So, okay, so what we say is that even if we living people are responsible, still those way is different, right? So on to my third point. So also the closing government side told you that under their paradigm, those living people can develop the technology more. This, for example, the eco-friendly technology by pushing the company to research the new technology and so forth. But firstly, our question is that how we can incentivize the company to create a new technology under their paradigm, because preserving meaning that those companies and all people have the expectation that those current resources will not run out because we are preserving, and those living standards will continue because we are preserving. So we think those situations, those expectations rather hinder those new development, right? So but under our burden, because we can incentivize the company to invest the much more money, so because company can expect that because those natural resources will be run out, it is a business chance, and because government can believe that it maximize their profit, we can incentivize that, because we have to recognize that investment for the new technology is so costly and it's so risky. Right? So that's why we think in order to make the company to choose the invest in new technology, we have to we shouldn't preserve, and rather we have to pursue the new living standard and new technology, and that's why those operations are going into.
I thank all speakers of the House for that debate. Invite everyone to cross the floor, shake hands, and we will deliberate. No, not yet.